This next section is a very important section before we move on to the Sempressa lecture. We will stay on the African continent to take a look at the issue of diversity and inclusiveness in visual journalism. Our visual media world is shaped by photographers and editors who, however talented and informed they are, curate from the standpoint of their own cultural background. They shape that visual world to their own image. Hence the crucial importance of diversity within those photographers and editors who produce the stories that we see. Who can better understand a culture than those who are actually part of it? Who can better share experiences than those who have actually lived them? Hence again, the importance of nurturing talents, training professionals of visual journalism in those countries that still lack enough of them. And despite the considerable challenges faced in the process, in Zimbabwe and Ethiopia, two remarkable initiatives are underway to expand visual journalism. Angela Jimu is from Zimbabwe. She holds a master's in media management from the University of Westminster in the UK. She worked as a photojournalist in Zimbabwe, and she has created the Zimbabwe Association for Female Photographers. She did this in 2013, and in this framework, she organizes workshops, mentoring, and project-based training for women photographers. Maheder Haileselassie is a photographer from Ethiopia. She is a member of the African Photojournalism Database, and she took part in the World Press Photos East Africa Masterclass in 2016, and then proceeded to create the Center for Photography in Ethiopia, CPE, which is a learning and discussion platform for Ethiopian photographers. Please welcome Angela and Maheder. You will be presenting us with your projects, and then we'll have time for a discussion about this really crucial issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Daphne. Thank you all for being here. And thank you, World Press, for bringing me here. Okay, so I'm from Zimbabwe, and for those who don't know about Zimbabwe, it's Mugabe country. If you've ever heard of Mugabe, that's where I come from. But now we have a new president. So I started journalism and public relations before going into photojournalism. I went to South Africa. I went to the Market Photo Workshop. It's a school of photography in Newtown, in Joburg, because we don't have many photography schools in Zimbabwe. Actually, I think we have 2 only, and you have to be full-time. So I decided to go to South Africa because of the opportunities that were presented there. I went there in 2010. It was a very exciting time because then there was the World Cup, but it was also very scary. Joburg is not very friendly. It wasn't for me anyway. I remember one of the first introductions that I had to photojournalism was we had to do a project on the transport system in the city of Joburg. What happened is that I was taking pictures on, it's called Gandhi Square, and then this bus driver saw me and he manhandled me and wanted to confiscate my camera. So that was like my first baptism of fire. So after my PDP, photojournalism and documentary photography, I moved back to Zimbabwe, where I was working as a photojournalist. I worked for the Mail, and I had a brush with the law, my first experience. I got arrested, and I got detained, and I went to the police station, and I spent some time there. I was forced to delete my pictures, and the lawyer from my workplace came, but it was too late. The pictures were gone. And I worked for the Zimbabwe Mail. Also, I had a brush with the law. I was covering a peaceful demonstration, and I was assaulted by the cops with baton sticks. They handcuffed me. They took me to the station. I spent the whole day there. No food, no water, nothing. Because Zimbabwe has had issues with press freedom for many years now, particularly during the Mugabe era. We had problems, and in 2017, we were ranked 128 out of 180 on the World Press Freedom Index, so you can imagine that it's not very friendly. So those are my two experiences in Zimbabwe that, you know, have shaped me. Sometimes you're too scared to take out your camera, and sometimes you don't know if someone's going to come out and assault you. All right, I'm going to talk about 5 of my images that I think tell the story of my journey. Okay, sorry, it seems like nothing's happening. All right. All right. Okay, so this picture, for me, this image represents the police brutality. So these police recruits, they have their heads shaven off, and they present terror, particularly to journalists. So at this function, it was actually a function. They were being sent to Mozambique, where they were visiting some war shrines so that they could be indoctrinated. So it represents terror for me. Those heads are something that I don't actually want to come across. And sorry, let me just move on to the next image. Okay, this one. In 2013, Zimbabwe adopted a new constitution. We had a constitution, it was a Lancaster House constitution that was signed in London, I think it was in 1979. So we didn't have a constitution. That one, they used to change it. So we adopted a new constitution in 2013. So that year we had elections, and those elections were a watershed election. So this was on the 31st of July. It's winter in Zimbabwe around that time. So I went early in the morning to a place called Epworth. It's on the peripheries of Harare. And I saw this queue of women. It was just women only. And I was baffled because I was thinking, why is this queue made up of women only? And then to me, I just thought the allegations of rigging elections was true, because you cannot just have a queue of women. Of course, we have 52% of our population as women, but that doesn't warrant a whole queue of women waiting to vote. This was around 6 a.m., right? Okay, so the generals. I took this image a few days after Mugabe had been re-elected, in quotes. To me, it represents that the generals are secure in their work. They don't care what's going on, because there was a lot of dissent around that time. It was like there was a funeral in Harare. Everyone was so unhappy with the election results. And these guys, they seem like they don't care. Everything is okay for them. All right. So I took this image on National Heroes Day. It's in August. This was also a few days after Mugabe had been re-elected. And there was still that mood of uncertainty. But these youths, they were chanting slogans, supporting Mugabe. And I was thinking, how can they support Mugabe? They are so young. How can you support someone who's so old with no new ideas? This is my mother. I was documenting her because she's an urban farmer. What has happened over the years is that people have resorted to urban farming because of the economic challenges that we've experienced over the years. So a lot of people are now into urban farming. They get any vacant pieces of land and then they just grow their maize, which is our staple. Okay, I will move on. So in 2013, we launched what is called the Zimbabwe Association of Female Photographers. Myself, Davina Jogi, Nancy Mteki, Cynthia Matonodze, and other women who work in the photography industry in Zimbabwe. So the idea was to develop the landscape in Zimbabwe in terms of photography through networking, project-based training. And we also wanted to help with visual literacy, increase visual literacy, bringing art to the people. And also we wanted to tell a different narrative, because the industry is very male-dominated. Even in South Africa, there are a little bit more females, but it's still very male-dominated. So we also wanted to tell a different narrative. Okay, so the successes we've had, this was our first exhibition. We called it Shutter Opener. This was our launch exhibition. We did tours for high school kids, and this is, it's called Gateway High School. They came through and we did a tour for them. All right, so this is, it was a media diversity fair, because we're always talking about issues of diversity, and we really don't have much of that. So there was a fair that was organized, and we were part of this. All right, so in 2013, we had a project. It was called Before and Aftermath. We wanted to tell a different narrative of the Zimbabwean elections. So we were documenting life around elections, before, during, and after the elections. And we had a public exhibition in the park, in the walkway. Harare Gardens is like the biggest park in Harare. So we had the exhibition in the walkway. So it was free for all to see. The idea also behind this exhibition was that we wanted to tell our own stories. Sometimes people are sent from overseas to go and tell a story, but they are looking for a particular angle. We wanted to tell it our way. All right. This project is Survivors and Activists. We were documenting survivors of human rights abuses. Zimbabwe has been known for human rights abuses. So we were documenting the survivors and the activists. So we had two exhibitions. This was on the streets. It was a human billboard exhibition, and we were handing out pamphlets to anyone who cared to receive them. And we also had, as part of it, we had a 2-day workshop with 2 photographers from South Africa, Neon Soma and Sydney Seshibedi. We had portfolio review. This is when we were having portfolio review with them as part of the same project. Okay, and our biggest and most recent project was bringing the World Press Photo to Harare for a whole month in the park in Harare Gardens as well. So the lady in the blue dress, that's the Dutch ambassador. We got funding from the Dutch embassy. They've always supported us, even from inception through HIVOS. So they funded this particular project. Yeah, this is in the park. Everyone was free to go and see it. They didn't have to pay. That's the thing that we have always tried for, that people don't pay to see art. Okay, so what I can say about the ZAFP, we've had many successes and some challenges, but now we're looking towards being self-sustaining. We need continuity. We haven't been able to do many projects. We haven't been able to have a greater impact because we are funded on a project-by-project basis. So what we're looking to do is we want to be self-sustaining. So that's what we are working on now, so that we can have a greater impact. We can establish a resource center. We can even establish a photography school in Harare. So that's what we are working towards now. Thank you.
Thank you. Maheder, would you like to present yourself, and then we can talk about these issues?
Here you go. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I can't really remember the last time I actually stood in front of an audience this huge, and I'm really super nervous. Yeah, so my name is Maheder Haileselassie. I am a photographer born and based in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. I wouldn't call it an accident, but then again, I've never really remember that I wanted to become a photographer. In fact, we don't really have a photography department in schools, in different schools in Ethiopia, so I never knew that photography existed in this form. But I've always been interested in literature, and as a kid, I saw myself becoming a writer. Unfortunately, the arts department in Ethiopia is not very well encouraging, but the government had, of course, a growth and transformation plan for the country, where 70% of the students actually join in the natural sciences field. So I joined in as well and ended up becoming a civil engineer. Of course, I loved looking at family albums and everything, but it wasn't until the fourth year of my university studies that I got hold of a phone camera. Actually, I kind of tricked my parents into buying me one, and then started taking pictures with it. So 7 years have passed since then, and on the way, I kind of realized that writing and photography have so many things in common, and they are actually not that different anyway, and both are used to tell stories that a particular person finds very interesting. And one of the stories that I found interesting was the Aramba community in Ethiopia, which is located on the remote parts of the country. Research once reflected on them, saying that they resemble a communist Ethiopia, because the Aramba community, they collaborate, they believe in working together, they support their elderly, and they also don't believe in religion. And they are also the only community in Ethiopia where men literally work in household stuffs and cook and raise children without any shame. In the second work, titled Intimate Spaces or Walls, it looks into the idea of history, prestige, family, nostalgia, and things like that through the public and private spaces of walls, different walls found in Ethiopia. Yeah, so beyond working on my own personal projects, I also enjoy Instagramming. For so long, stereotypical images of Africa missing the voice of African photographers have been circulating around. And not many countries actually have tasted the outcomes of these images better than Ethiopia, with all the visual representations of famine, drought, and poverty through the years. Now, I don't really necessarily believe in producing this counter-narrative where you negate these images of poverty and everything, and maybe that's also one of the reasons why I really like Instagram, and I really like showing my everyday without really having the burden of changing anything. And I contribute to Everyday Africa on Instagram, and I also run Everyday Ethiopia, where we are actually now trying to set it up with different Ethiopian photographers to grow it and to nurture it more. And about 15 months back, after discussing with fellow photographers in Ethiopia, I started CPE, which stands for Center for Photography in Ethiopia, which is a training, a discussion, and a collaboration platform for Ethiopian photographers. It's currently being funded by the European Union through the Goethe Institute as part of the Creative Futures program. So what we do is we provide different workshops and trainings and mentorship programs for young Ethiopian photographers, and we also do exhibitions and installations which are open for the public. This image is while we were running the Center for Photography Workshop #1, where we focused on visual literacy and project idea development. Participants were introduced to the history of African photography, and they were encouraged to do interviews and films on existing and very established Ethiopian, very few also, Ethiopian photographers. This is on a location in Addis. It's part of the project we called Photo Kajjakaj. So what we did was we tried to take out photography out in the open on the streets and kind of create awareness for the public. And we basically set up this mini studio on different busy street locations in Addis Ababa, in the capital city. And then we just photographed, took different portraits of the passerbys. And these are a few images. And we printed it out and gave it to them, and then at the end it was exhibited. We took hundreds to, I don't know, 300-400 of portraits. And we also did a collaboration with an architecture school in Ethiopia, an architecture university in Ethiopia, where we brought together 5-6 photographers with 5-6 architecture students, and we discussed on the idea of family archives, history, photography, and architecture together. And then the outcomes were also installed in the school compound, as well as different city locations, public locations in Addis Ababa. Yeah, so earlier on this presentation, I talked about how I wanted to become a writer, but ended up becoming a civil engineer and then become a photographer. So this is not just my journey, but it's also the journey of different photographers in Ethiopia, artists, and as well as creatives. This is an image. This image is part of a body of work titled "My Grandfather is a Photographer." It was done on one of our workshops by a photographer named Addis Amiro. Addis is an agronomist. She works for an agronomy firm, but she wants to become a full-time photographer. We have been working with her, and for this, on one of our workshops, she actually traveled to see her grandfather for the first time, and she did a story on him and felt very much reconnected in a way that she never really thought she would. This is Abdi Beqqele's photo. Abdi, he works as a radiologist. He's also a graphic designer, but wants to become a full-time photographer as well. He's currently working on the story of women working as daily laborers in the construction industry in Ethiopia. Yeah, this is also one of the photographers that we are working with now. Her name is Maheder Haileselassie. The body of work is it has no title. She titled it as Untitled. She looks into her identity, her past, and the things that happened while she was a child. CPE was first started mainly because neither me nor the photographers that I knew, my friends, had really that many opportunities to come together or to participate in different trainings and workshops regularly. And I have grown so much with the Center for Photography so far, and it's my hopes that different photographers that we've been working with and also will continue to work with will grow as well. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. So it sounds like you have many projects going on in parallel, and can you tell us about maybe, I guess what I'd like to hear about is what are the kind of alternative narratives that you'd like to see or hear coming up from this new source of visual storytelling that the generation of the photographers that you're training now can produce? Maybe, Angela, would you like to start? It's on.
I think one of the things that is important, especially for me, is that Africa, Zimbabwe in particular, I'll speak on behalf of my country, is that it's not all gloom and doom. I remember attending a workshop in South Africa organized by Guti, and someone stood up and said, poverty is sexy, it sells, but there's actually a lot more to Africa than that. Those are the stories that we want to tell. Stories of hope, like Amy presented in the morning. Those are different kinds of narratives. So I think to be able to do that, you need to increase diversity. You need to have more women telling those stories, and they're telling them in their own context. So they have a better understanding of the place that they live. They have a better understanding of the culture and the people that they have in their communities.
And so there's one thing is to have these people who have. What about the equipment? Where do you have help in funding the cameras that you have, the computers? Who helps you financially for that? Because that's it can be quite a budget, especially if you have 20. How many photographers do you have in the group of photographers that you work with? Each of you? Almost 30? Is that the same for you?
We were 25, but our numbers have dwindled a bit because, you know, the issue with the cooperatives. Thompson, 2015, said that, you know, towards a social theory of the firm, said that the thing with cooperatives, they can be counterproductive. Sometimes people are not as cooperative as they should be. So our numbers have sort of dwindled down to about 15 now. Okay. Some have relocated. But the issue, going back to your question about equipment, we fund ourselves, all right, and it's a big issue. Recently, one of our members had her equipment stolen. Oh. So she had to go to South Africa and spend like 60,000 rand to replace it, because insurance companies in Zimbabwe don't actually insure our equipment individually. It's either under office equipment or household equipment. You cannot just go in and say, I want to insure my equipment. They won't allow that.
Maheder, maybe you can tell us about these works that are being produced. What is the ideal audience that they should have? Is it national, the continent, abroad, everything? How do you reach out with the work that is produced by your students?
Yeah, so ideally everyone should be an audience, but we don't really work towards educating a particular audience. So it should be, I think, yeah, at least I believe that it should be pretty much everyone. So currently we've been working with 10 photographers for the past 5-6 months in mentoring them, in letting them produce their own works. Partly we exhibited locally, so that, of course, we say that photography is about informing and educating, so we also want their works to reach the public in Ethiopia, in our country. And then on top of that, we are also working on a publication so that we can reach much larger audience than that, and we can also have a document that can actually last longer than an exhibition. Yeah, and we are also looking forward to presenting their works in different platforms and seminars and programs like this one.
I'm afraid I don't know the answer to this. What is the situation of freedom of the press in Ethiopia? I know in Zimbabwe it's probably quite restricted. What about in Ethiopia?
Yeah, I think they are pretty much similar from what Angela has been telling me, but like the thing is, Ethiopia has been represented quite extremely in the past few decades. In one visual narrative is this famine, drought, and poverty, and the other one is this church, priestess and things like that. So the government is not quite happy about these representations, and they know that photography can actually damage really in depth. So they now have this term, which is image building, and they are really trying towards work toward this building the image of the country. So photography is basically being seen as a weapon. So people don't really, let alone the government, people don't really like to be photographed on the streets. Yeah, so it's the same regarding press. It's not very easy, and access has always been a problem.
People feel threatened by when there's a photographer.
Yes, they directly link it to aid, to foreign aid, to NGOs. Yes, that has been pretty much the case. That's how we work.
So NGOs are not very well regarded in Ethiopia?
No, not generally, but we had this really horrible drought a few decades back, and it has kind of left a scar on so many people, because the minute that was out, the emperor at the time, he has to go down in a way. So they know what photography does to the government, and the power of photography in exposing things. So people are not happy either, and they usually relate it to these things.
But then your kind of initiative should, on the contrary, be an opportunity for them. This is like an ideal idea, but an opportunity for them to use photography in a positive way to show their image of their country differently. Is there a way you can persuade them that that's possible?
Yes, but I think change generally needs time. That's a problem. And we are also not trying to sell ourselves like that. We're not saying that we are creating a different narrative or we are doing a positive narrative for you, because we're not. We're just trying to balance between this. We don't really want to oversimplify the problems, so we also want to expose the problems. At the same time, we want to do the stories that are actually quite interesting. So I don't think we can actually convince them by saying that we are doing a positive story, because at times we are necessarily not.
Okay, I would like to add that since the coup, that was not a coup, the military takeover, it has improved a bit, but only time will tell, because we have the elections coming up in July, so we'll see how that goes.
Will some of your students be covering the election?
Yes, definitely.
And are they in contact with agencies? How are you going to get those photographies across the border?
Okay, that's one thing that we've been talking about, that sometimes you have people coming into the country, they have been assigned to go and get the story from there, and then we don't have any local photographers sending out their images, because there are people already there telling the story on our behalf.
Well, seen from the point of view of somebody who works with from abroad with photographers with reporters that we send in, what you have to provide to abroad is invaluable, because you can get the terrain from the inside. You can find the person, the village, the situation, the shopkeeper who can be the base, the beginning of a story from which we can build and give a voice to these people, and that's really invaluable. So your relations with foreign press are for us, it's invaluable. So what you're doing is really something that we'll be looking at closely. Are there any questions? Right here. Where's the mic? Here's the mic. The mic's right there.
Thanks. My question is for Maheder. I follow your account on Instagram. I'm very happy that you actually photograph everyday Addis or the streets in Ethiopia, which feels like I am there physically. So thank you for that. I wonder if you have got any a code of conduct for your work from the government, if there is anything that you have to follow, since it's not that democratic.
I'm not sure if I understand it correctly, but they don't really have, like the only code of conduct that we know is you're not allowed to photograph governmental buildings and governmental offices. But it seems like currently you are not allowed to photograph anything at all. That's how they think. Yeah, if a police stopped you somewhere, then it's not about the rule of law or anything like that, but it's about the fact that you have a camera and you're not allowed to photograph unless you have a particular license. And to get that license, it's very complicated and a long process. Yeah. Did I answer it?
Good afternoon, and thank you for sharing your work. My question is, do you consider yourself as an artist or as a journalist?
I don't really label myself. Well, I mean, I think things have been transitioning so much in the past few years for me. Like, the more I know, sometimes the more I get confused, but at the same time, the more diverse works that I do. I also work as a journalist, I think most of the time, but I also work as a documentary photographer, and currently I'm also interested in conceptual documentaries, so I'm not sure if I can call myself an artist, but yeah, I'm trying.
I have a question about your initiative, the market photo workshop. Is there a sense of trying to develop, to reach out beyond borders and develop a network of these workshops, exchange students? How have you maybe thought of that already and implemented that?
Okay, we have been working with a South African photographer, Neon Soma.
Sorry, who? What's
Neon Soma. Okay, so we are working with her in establishing something like the ZAFP, but across the continent. And already we are speaking to Toko Chikondi, that one is in Malawi. So we are hoping to have a network of female photographers on the African continent. But like I said earlier, most of our photographers in our association went to the market photo workshop. So like right now we are in the process of organizing an exhibition in South Africa at the market photo workshop.
Yeah, I think this horizontal relationships between different African countries, these different regional programs are very, very important. We have done one this year with Uganda. Me and other two photographers went to Uganda and exhibited our works of 5 photographers there at the Uganda Press Awards, which was really good. And we are very strongly for it. We are also hoping to communicate with, to work with Sudan in the coming, I don't know, year or next 2 years. And with South Africa, we have also been keeping a very close relationship because one of my mentors was John Fleetwood. He's from South Africa and he has been a director. He used to be a director of the Market Photo Workshop. So yeah, we do have different good links from different countries. So yeah, it's definitely in our minds.
There's a question right here. Where the mic is. Here comes the mic.
Thank you. If you would have all freedom to photograph whatever you want to, what would you tell stories? What kind of stories would you tell?
Okay. For instance, there's a story that I would like to tell about soccer moms in our country. We have people who have chosen to stay at home. They are stay-at-home mothers. So their life revolves around their children. They are busy taking them for school runs, sports, ballet, and things like that. It might not be interesting to some people, but this is the other side that I was talking about earlier, that, you know, there is other stories out there. There are other stories that we can tell.
Yeah, personally, I would really like to do investigative journalism, especially now that my country is under the state of emergency. Actually, we had 3 state of emergencies declared in the past couple of years. So I would really like to do something on that. Yeah, so basically something probably the government wouldn't like. If I have the freedom, I would definitely do that.
Thank you very much. Good luck. Congratulations. Thank you, Maheder. That was great. Thanks, Angela. See you later.